Imagine standing in front of a structure so massive that even modern engineers struggle to understand how it was supposed to be finished. A construction project so ambitious that it could have reshaped an entire civilization. Yet something strange happened. The project suddenly stopped. Tools were left behind. Plans were abandoned. And the megastructure was never completed. For centuries, it has stood as one of history's greatest architectural mysteries. Who started it? Why was it built? And most importantly, why was it abandoned? Before we uncover the truth behind this unfinished megastructure, take a moment to subscribe and like the video if you enjoy exploring forgotten mysteries of ancient civilizations. It helps us bring more hidden stories like this to light. Because the structure you're about to discover wasn't just another building. It was supposed to be one of the largest construction projects humanity had ever attempted. Across the ancient world, civilization competed to build monuments that symbolized power and ambition. Massive temples, towering pyramids, gigantic fortresses. But sometimes rulers dreamed of building something even greater. Structures so enormous that they would redefine the limits of engineering. One of the most fascinating examples of such ambition can be seen in the ruins of the unfinished obelisk in Aswan. Carved directly into the bedrock of a granite quarry, this colossal monument was meant to become the largest obelisk ever created. Had it been completed, it would have stood over 40 meters tall and weighed more than 1,000 tons. To put that into perspective, that's heavier than many modern skyscraper components. And yet ancient workers were carving it thousands of years ago using tools far simpler than anything we use today. But the most astonishing part of the story is not the construction itself. It's what happened next. Because while the obelisk was still being carved from the rock, something went wrong. A massive crack appeared in the granite. And suddenly, the entire project was abandoned. The giant stone was left exactly where it had been carved. Half completed, still attached to bedrock, frozen in time. But this unfinished monument reveals something extraordinary about ancient engineering. By studying the tool marks, archaeologists have discovered how workers shaped enormous blocks of granite. Thousands of workers likely spent months, or even years, carefully chiseling around the stone. Using pounding stones made of harder rock, they slowly carved channels around the obelisk. Day after day, week after week, month after month, removing granite piece by piece. It was a process that required incredible precision, because one mistake could ruin the entire project. And unfortunately, that is exactly what happened. The crack that appeared in the stone made the obelisk structurally unstable. If workers had attempted to lift it, the monument could have shattered. So the builders made a difficult decision. They stopped immediately and walked away from one of the most ambitious construction projects of the ancient world. But here's where the story becomes even more fascinating. Because the unfinished obelisk wasn't just a failed monument. It became a time capsule of ancient engineering. The site preserved something incredibly rare, evidence of how ancient megastructures were actually built. Normally, we only see finished monuments, pyramids, temples, statues, but the unfinished obelisk shows the construction process itself. The grooves cut into stone, the shaping techniques, the working methods used thousands of years ago. It's like discovering a pause moment in history, a construction site frozen forever. And when archaeologists began studying it closely, they realized something incredible. The ancient Egyptians were attempting engineering feats that even modern machines would find challenging. But this wasn't the only abandoned megastructure in history. Across the world, civilizations attempted projects so ambitious that some were never completed. Gigantic temples, massive statues, entire cities left unfinished. Each one tells a story of ambition and failure. Because building something enormous is never simple. It requires resources, planning, political stability, and sometimes a little luck. Remove just one of those factors, and even the greatest construction project can collapse before it is finished. But the biggest question remains. Why were these projects abandoned so suddenly? Was it engineering failure, political upheaval, economic collapse, or something even more mysterious? Because history shows that sometimes megastructures were abandoned not because they couldn't be completed, but because the civilizations building them disappeared. And in the next part of this story, we will explore some of the most mysterious unfinished megastructures ever discovered, projects that were meant to reshape entire landscapes, but instead became silent monuments to lost ambition. So if you're fascinated by ancient engineering mysteries and forgotten construction projects, make sure to subscribe and like the video. The unfinished obelisk left behind in the granite quarries of Aswan revealed something incredible about ancient engineering. But it was only the beginning. Because once historians began studying abandoned construction sites across the world, they discovered something surprising. Human history is filled with unfinished megastructures, projects so enormous that entire civilizations poured their resources into them. Yet for reasons still debated today, many of them were suddenly abandoned, left incomplete, frozen in time. One of the most fascinating examples of this mystery lies in the dense jungles of Cambodia, where the ancient Khmer civilization built some of the most ambitious architectural projects in history. Among them was a legendary temple complex of Angkor Wat. Today, Angkor Wat stands as one of the largest religious monuments ever constructed. But what many people don't realize is that Angkor Wat was only one part of a much larger vision. The Khmer Empire had plans to build a massive network of temples, reservoirs, canals, and cities across the region. Some of these projects were completed, others were not. Hidden deep in the jungle are partially built temples where construction suddenly stopped. Stone blocks lie scattered across the ground. Carvings remain unfinished. Walls were never completed. And just like the unfinished obelisk in Egypt, these abandoned sites provide a rare glimpse into ancient construction techniques. Workers carved massive sandstone blocks, transported them across rivers and forests, and assembled them into towering structures. The scale of these projects was staggering. Entire cities were designed around monumental architecture. But then something happened. The Khmer Empire began to decline. Climate changes disrupted the water management systems that supported agriculture. Political conflicts weakened the empire's stability. Trade networks shifted. And gradually, the enormous building project that once defined the civilization came to a halt. Without the empire's vast resources, construction simply stopped. The jungle slowly reclaimed the unfinished structures. For centuries they remained hidden beneath dense vegetation, until explorers rediscovered them hundreds of years later. But Cambodia was not the only place where abandoned megastructures reveal forgotten ambitions. Across the Mediterranean world, another unfinished monument stands as a silent reminder of a ruler's grand vision. On the island of Sicily, archaeologists discovered a massive Greek temple that was never completed. The Temple of Olympian Zeus was meant to be one of the largest temples in the entire Greek world. Its columns were enormous. Its design was unlike anything seen before. The temple even included giant human-like statues known as telemines, which were designed to support parts of the structure. But despite the ambitious design, the temple was never finished. Construction suddenly stopped during the 5th century BC. Why? Because the city building the temple faced a devastating event: war. In 406 BCE, the powerful city of Agrigento was attacked and destroyed during a conflict with invading forces. The city fell, its population fled or was killed, and the enormous temple project was abandoned forever. Once again, a megastructure had been stopped not by engineering failure, but by the collapse of the society building it. These stories reveal something important about ancient architecture. Megastructures were not just engineering projects. They were symbols of civilization itself. They required stable governments, strong economies, organized labor forces, and long-term vision. Remove any one of these factors, and even the most ambitious construction project could collapse overnight. But sometimes abandonment happened for reasons that remain far more mysterious. In Peru, high in the Andes Mountains, lies a massive Inca construction site known as Ollantaytambo. This location was meant to become one of the most impressive architectural complexes of the Inca Empire. Gigantic stone terraces rise along the mountainside. Massive carved stones lie scattered across the valley. Some blocks weigh over 100 tons, and yet many of them were never placed into the final structure. They remain exactly where workers left them centuries ago. Some stones even appear to have been abandoned during transportation, frozen halfway through the construction process. Historians believe the project may have been interrupted by the arrival of Spanish conquistadors in the 16th century. The sudden collapse of the Inca Empire halted construction across the region. Once again, one of the world's most ambitious building projects was left unfinished. But perhaps the most fascinating pattern in all these stories is this. Ancient civilizations repeatedly attempted megastructures that pushed the limits of their technology. Sometimes they succeeded, but sometimes The project became too ambitious, too expensive, too vulnerable to political or environmental changes. And when the civilization faltered, the megastructure remained behind as silent evidence of what might have been. But here's where the mystery becomes even more intriguing. Because not every abandoned megastructure can be explained by war or collapse. Some projects appear to have been abandoned suddenly, without any clear reason at all. Construction sites where tools were left behind. Half-carved stones still attached to bedrock. Walls that stopped mid-construction, almost as if the workers simply vanished. And in Part 3 of this story, we will explore some of the most puzzling unfinished megastructures ever discovered. Structures so enormous that even modern engineers still debate how ancient builders planned to complete them. If you enjoy uncovering hidden mysteries of ancient engineering and forgotten civilizations, make sure to like the video and subscribe, because the next chapter reveals megastructures so ambitious that historians still struggle to explain them. And some of them may hold secrets about technologies we barely understand today. By now, one thing is becoming clear. Ancient civilizations didn't think small. They dreamed on a scale that still surprises modern engineers. Gigantic temples, colossal statues, massive cities carved directly into mountains. But sometimes their ambition pushed the limits of what was possible. And when that happened, the results were extraordinary. Because across the world there are construction sites where ancient builders began projects so enormous that even today we struggle to understand how they planned to finish them. One of the most mysterious examples lies deep in the mountains of Lebanon, at an ancient Roman site known as Baalbek. At first glance, Baalbek appears to be another impressive Roman temple complex. Towering columns, massive stone platforms, beautifully carved architecture. But hidden within the foundation stones of the site lies something that has puzzled historians for centuries. Gigantic stone blocks so enormous that even modern cranes would struggle to lift them. Some of the stones weigh more than 800 tons. But the most astonishing discovery lies inside the Nebai quarry. There, archaeologists discovered one of the largest stones ever cut by human hands. It is known as the Stone of the Pregnant Woman. The stone measures over 20 meters long and weighs approximately 1,000 tons. To understand how incredible that is, a modern fully loaded passenger airplane weighs less than this single stone. Yet ancient builders carved it directly out of the bedrock. But here's the strange part. The stone was never moved. It still rests in the quarry exactly where workers left it thousands of years ago. Nearby, archaeologists later discovered an even larger unfinished stone block, even heavier, even more massive. Clearly, the builders intended to transport these stones to the temple complex. But for some reason, they never did. Why? Some historians believe the builders realized the stones were simply too large to transport safely. Others suggest political changes interrupted the project. But the truth remains uncertain. And Baalbek is not the only place where ancient builders left behind unfinished giants. Across the ocean in Japan, there's a mysterious stone structure that has puzzled archaeologists for decades. Hidden within a quiet hillside lies the enormous monolith known as Masuda no Iwafune. Unlike natural rock formations, this massive stone appears to have been carefully carved by human hands. It weighs over 800 tons. Perfectly flat surfaces cover its sides. 2 large square holes are carved into the top. But no one knows exactly why it was built. Even more mysterious, the structure was never finished. The surrounding area shows signs that workers were carving the rock directly from the hillside. But the project suddenly stopped. And just like many other megastructures around the world, the tools disappeared, the workers vanished, and the unfinished monument remained behind. For centuries, locals created their own explanations. Some believed the stone was part of an ancient astronomical observatory. Others thought it was connected to early burial rituals. But the truth has never been fully confirmed. Yet perhaps the most fascinating unfinished megastructure on Earth lies on one of the most remote islands in the Pacific Ocean, the island of Easter Island, famous for its giant stone statues known as the moai. These towering figures stand across the island's coastline, watching silently over the ocean. Each statue was carved from volcanic rock. Some stand over 10 meters tall. But what many visitors never see is the place where these statues were created. A volcanic quarry known as Reino Raraku. Here, hundreds of statues remain partially carved directly into the rock. Some are only half finished. Others appear ready to be moved but were never transported. And dozens lie abandoned along ancient pathways across the island. Evidence suggests that the island's inhabitants once planned to build far more statues than those we see today. But something changed. The society responsible for carving them began to collapse. Environmental damage from deforestation likely caused food shortages. Conflict may have erupted among communities. And eventually the statue-building tradition came to an abrupt end, leaving behind a quarry filled with unfinished giants. Together, these sites reveal something extraordinary about ancient civilizations. Their ambitions were often limitless. They dreamed of building structures that pushed the boundaries of technology, labor, and resources. But the world is unpredictable. Wars happen, empires fall, environments change, and sometimes even the greatest visions must be abandoned. Yet these unfinished megastructures hold a powerful secret. They show us the process of ancient construction. Tool marks, carving methods, engineering strategies, things we rarely see in completed monuments. It's like discovering the blueprints of ancient innovation. But perhaps the most intriguing question of all is this. What if some megastructures were abandoned not because they failed, but because their purpose changed? Because in Part 4 of this story, we will explore abandoned construction projects that may have been intentionally left unfinished. Structures where builders may have walked away by choice. And the reasons behind those decisions might reveal something surprising about ancient civilizations. So if you enjoy exploring forgotten engineering mysteries and ancient construction secrets, make sure to subscribe and like the video, because the final chapters of this story reveal megastructures that might have been abandoned for reasons far stranger than failure. And some historians believe they hold clues about how ancient societies really worked. By now we've seen a pattern repeated across the ancient world. Gigantic structures started with incredible ambition, only to be abandoned before they were ever finished. Sometimes war stopped them. Sometimes empires collapsed. Sometimes the engineering simply failed. But historians have begun to consider another possibility. What if some of these megastructures were never meant to be completed in the first place? Before we explore this fascinating possibility, make sure to subscribe and like the video if you enjoy uncovering hidden mysteries of ancient civilizations. It helps the channel continue exploring stories that history almost forgot, because some ancient monuments may have been designed not as finished buildings, but as symbols of power during construction itself. Think about it. In many ancient societies, building projects lasted for decades, sometimes even centuries. Rulers knew they might never live long enough to see their projects completed, but that didn't stop them from starting them. Why? Because the act of construction itself could demonstrate power. If a ruler could command thousands of workers, move enormous stones, and reshape entire landscapes, it showed the world that their authority was immense. One of the most fascinating examples of this idea appears in ancient China, where the construction of the Great Wall of China stretched across multiple dynasties. The wall we see today is actually the result of centuries of expansion, rebuilding, and redesign. Different sections were built during different periods. Some parts were abandoned, others were expanded, and some were never completed at all. Entire stretches of the wall were planned but never finished. Yet the project still served its purpose. It demonstrated the ability of Chinese rulers to mobilize enormous labor forces and reshape the landscape on a continental scale. Even unfinished sections contributed to that message. Power, control, authority. But there's another fascinating example of an abandoned megastructure that reveals something even more mysterious. In Barcelona, one of the most famous architectural projects in the modern world has remained under construction for more than a century. The breathtaking basilica known as Sagrada Familia, designed by the visionary architect Antoni Gaudí, construction began in 1882. But Gaudí's design was so complex and ambitious that the project continued long after his death. For decades, the structure remained incomplete, and even today, construction continues. In this case, the unfinished state of the building became part of its story. Visitors from around the world came not only to see the architecture, but to witness the process itself. The evolution of an idea across generations. Now imagine something similar happening thousands of years ago. Ancient rulers might begin massive projects knowing they would not finish them, but the project would inspire awe for generations. A monument to ambition itself. Yet there's another reason some megastructures were abandoned, and it has nothing to do with war or engineering. Sometimes societies simply change their priorities. Civilizations evolve, religions shift, trade routes move, And suddenly a project that once seemed essential no longer matters. In ancient Turkey, archaeologists discovered an extraordinary prehistoric site known as Göbekli Tepe. Dating back more than 11,000 years, Göbekli Tepe contains massive stone pillars arranged in circular formations. Some of these structures were completed, others appear unfinished. But the most surprising discovery was this. Instead of abandoning the site naturally, the builders intentionally buried it. They filled the structures with soil and debris, covering the entire complex. For thousands of years, the site remained hidden beneath the earth. Why would a civilization bury one of its greatest monuments? Historians believe the answer may lie in a major transformation in human society. Around the time Göbekli Tepe was built, humans were transitioning from hunter-gatherer lifestyles to early agriculture. New settlements formed. New cultural traditions appeared. And old ritual centers may have lost their importance. Instead of destroying the site, the builders may have deliberately sealed it away, preserving it in the process. If this theory is correct, Göbekli Tepe represents something extraordinary. A megastructure that wasn't abandoned through failure, but through cultural evolution, which leads to one final fascinating possibility. Sometimes megastructures remain unfinished not because civilizations collapse, but because their dreams change, and the projects they once considered essential are replaced by new visions. But the greatest mystery of abandoned megastructures is still waiting to be explored, because in the final chapter of this story, we will look at the deeper meaning behind these unfinished giants, what they reveal about human ambition, why civilizations repeatedly attempt projects beyond their limits, and why even today, humanity continues building megastructures that may never be completed. So if you enjoy exploring the hidden mysteries of ancient architecture and forgotten civilizations, make sure to subscribe and like the video, because the final part of this story reveals what abandoned megastructures truly tell us about human history. And the answer might change the way you see these silent monuments forever. Across deserts, jungles, mountains, and islands, the world is filled with abandoned megastructures, colossal stones that were never lifted, temples that were never completed, cities that were never finished. Each one began with an extraordinary vision, a dream powerful enough to mobilize thousands of workers, enough to move mountains, enough to reshape entire landscapes. But somewhere along the way, something changed. Before we uncover what these unfinished giants truly reveal about human history, take a moment to subscribe and like the video if you enjoy exploring forgotten mysteries of ancient civilizations, because these abandoned monuments hold a message far deeper than most people realize. At first glance, unfinished megastructures might appear to represent failure, projects that went wrong, ambitions that proved too great, civilizations that collapsed before completing their vision. But historians have begun to see them in a different way, not as failures, but as evidence of something extraordinary. Human ambition, because throughout history, civilizations have repeatedly attempted projects that push the limits of their technology, their resources, and their imagination. The unfinished obelisk in Aswan, the massive stones of Baalbek, the mysterious monolith of Masuda no Iwafune in Japan, the unfinished statues of Reino Raraku on Easter Island. Each one represents a moment when a civilization looked at the world around it and decided, we can build something even greater. Sometimes those visions succeeded. The pyramids, the great temples, the vast cities of the ancient world. But sometimes the project stopped halfway. And when they did, they left behind something incredibly valuable. Evidence, clues, a rare window into how ancient builders actually worked. Think about it. Most completed monuments hide their construction secrets. The outer layers cover the process. The finished structure hides mistakes. But abandoned megastructures reveal everything. Tool marks carved into stone, half-finished designs, quarries where giant blocks were shaped, transportation routes where stones were dragged across landscapes. It's like finding a construction site frozen in time, a moment when history paused and never resumed. And because of that, unfinished monuments have helped modern archaeologists solve mysteries that would otherwise remain hidden forever. They reveal the techniques used by ancient engineers, the organization of labor forces, the planning required to build on a massive scale. But beyond the technical discoveries, these unfinished giants reveal something even more fascinating. They show us how ancient civilizations thought about the future. Because every megastructure begins with an assumption, that the civilization building it will continue to exist long enough to finish it, that the workers will still be there, that the resources will still flow, that the society itself will remain stable. But history rarely works that way. Empires fall, trade routes shift, climates change, wars erupt, and sometimes a project that once seemed unstoppable suddenly loses the support that made it possible. When that happens, the structure is left behind, a silent reminder of a civilization's greatest dream. But here's the most fascinating part. Humanity never stopped building megastructures. Even today, we continue attempting projects that push the limits of what is possible. Gigantic skyscrapers rising into the clouds, massive bridges spanning entire bays, artificial islands built in the middle of oceans, space stations orbiting the Earth. Each one represents the same spirit that drove ancient builders thousands of years ago. The belief that we can shape the world around us. The belief that our ideas can become reality. But just like the ancient world, not every modern megastructure reaches completion. Economic crises stop projects. Political changes halt construction. Technological challenges delay ambitious designs. And sometimes the structures we begin today may become the unfinished monuments studied by historians thousands of years in the future. Imagine archaeologists in the distant future discovering the remains of one of our modern megaprojects. They might ask the same questions we ask today. Why was it started? Why was it abandoned? What did it mean to the people building it? Because unfinished megastructures are more than just buildings. They are stories. Stories of ambition. Stories of power. Stories of civilizations reaching beyond what seemed possible. And perhaps that is their greatest legacy. They remind us that history is not only defined by what was completed, but also by what was attempted. Because sometimes the most important achievements are not the monuments that stand finished, but the dreams bold enough to begin them. If you enjoyed exploring the mysteries behind abandoned megastructures and ancient engineering secrets, make sure to subscribe and stay with this channel. Because the world is full of forgotten projects, lost civilizations, and hidden monuments still waiting to be discovered. And the deeper we explore the past, the more incredible humanity's story becomes.